Welcome back to the Raw Christian Men's Podcast, a place for authentic, real-life discussion on faith, masculinity, and living as a Christian man in today's world. I'm Brad Martin. I'm here with Jim and Kyle. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
All right.
Doing well.
Today we're doing, it's a pretty special episode, something we've never done before, right? We're doing a remote interview. We got a special guest joining us remotely. He's an author. He's a missionary that served over a decade with the Free Burma Rangers. And he's also the founder of the Jungle Discipleship School. We got David Small with us. How you guys doing? Or how you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well, thanks, Brad. It's a team there, guys. It's just so awesome. I'm just so honored to share this space with you today.
No, we're honored to have you. I mean, you're doing exactly what we're being called to do. So it's great to have you on just to talk. So
awesome.
All right. So if you don't mind, Dave, just go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you into the missions and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. I'll share just a quick. So I work in Burma, Myanmar, and some people call it Myanmar, but there have been times where I've gone into villages and I am the first foreigner or the first kind of white person that's come into the villages. And I often make a joke when I go there, more to my own amusement than to anyone else's. But I say, oh yes, all of the people in North America selected the most handsome and most intelligent person to be their representative, and I am it. And so here I am. And that story came to mind because this is the first time you've done a remote interview, and I feel like we've selected the most intelligent and most handsome person to do this one. And,
yes.
And most humility is obviously, yeah. Go ahead.
Most people save the best for last. We made the best first. There you go.
That's right. Yeah. No. No, it's awesome to be with you guys. So I'm actually up in Canada right now. My parents are here up in Canada, and I'm on home assignment. But in just 2 weeks, I'll be heading back over to Burma. And I've been a missionary in Burma for 12 years. Before that, I was an ice hockey coach, and I was a soldier in the Army. I never planned to be a missionary. It was never on my career trajectory, but when I discovered God and when I entered into a relationship with God, I got to this place in my heart and in my life where I was like, oh, God is real. There is a creator. There is a God. He wants to be in a relationship with me. And if God is real, I can't just ignore him. I can't just be like, oh, well, that's nice. And okay, I'm going to go do my own thing. See you later. And so I kind of got to this place of saying, okay, God, you're real. And I give my life to you. I'm your servant. What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? And I ended up in Burma in the middle of a jungle in a war zone, and have spent the last 12 years as a missionary over there. And it's been the greatest adventure of my life.
Now, would you say that would be the point where you really kind of shifted your focus to just making disciples, or did that come later, during your time with the Rangers? Or
yeah, that's a good question. I think it's always been part of my heart. And one of my giftings has been in coaching, and coaching would be very similar to kind of making a disciple. And, when I was in my previous career, I was a hockey coach, and then I was an officer in the Army. And so in all of these kind of environments, you're discipling or mentoring up young people, whether they're a hockey player or a soldier. And then when I went to the Free Burma Rangers, I was doing that and training the young people in Burma to become Rangers. And I remember really clearly one day in Burma, I was on a mission and we were walking. We have to walk everywhere in Burma multiple days. And we had been walking for 15 hours and we were in knee-deep water. The Burma army is up on the mountainside. We have to be really quiet. And I'm wondering to myself, what am I doing here? This is really dangerous. What decisions did I make in my life that led me to this point where I'm sneaking around in the jungles of Burma and the Burma army's up there and they could mortar us or bomb us? And I thought, this is crazy. And I remember clearly thinking, what is worth my life? Is doing kids programs and helping the kids forget they're in a war zone worth my life? Is doing medical programs worth my life? They're all good things, but they're not in reality worth my life. And as I walked and I thought about this, I thought the only thing that's worth my life is the gospel of Jesus. And if I go into Burma and I help people in the war zone and I treat medical patients and I do kids programs and I shine a light on what the Burma army is doing, but I don't share the gospel, I'm wasting my time. It's not worth the sacrifice. It's not worth my life. And so that moment, I really remember clearly, it distilled it down that it has to be the focus of everything I do in Burma, is to go and make disciples of all nations, to go and share the gospel with people.
That's awesome. Uh, it's great that you felt that calling and were able to recognize it. And I mean, you spent 12 years as a missionary. I mean, most people go and maybe do a missionary trip. Like that is your life. That is your passion. And that's awesome. And we're glad to have you.
Can I pitch a question to you guys?
Absolutely.
What would you say holds people back, in your opinion, from, like, I see it because running a Jungle Discipleship School now, I need staff. And so I cannot for the life of me get anybody to come. And I feel like there's less and less people going into missions. And I'm curious, what do you guys think holds people back from saying, hey, I am going to go and be a missionary?
I have my thoughts, but I'll let you guys chime in first.
Jim? Well, I'll just say that family obligations, fear, all kinds of things enter into that, and if you've not been open to experiencing that and it's totally out of the realm of normal for you and someone proposes it, it might look kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about it, and I'm getting ready to retire, so I'm on the downhill. But when you think about it, first of all, just people wanting to be missionaries. We support a few missionaries here, and they range from 20-year-old to 60-year-old. And one thing about most of them is they don't have children, and so that makes a big difference. I've met some missionaries who have children once they're out in the mission field, but they didn't go out with children. So that might be, fear for your child, that kind of thing. That should I take my child into that environment? And am I doing the right thing? Those are some of the things that come to my mind. And maybe that's a cop out. But that's, if you came to me and said, Jim, why aren't you doing this today? My first reaction would be, my family's here. I have grandkids. I have all this life here that I would be giving up,
Uh-huh.
So that's my thought.
I think for me, I see America as really needing more missions done here. Like, as I watched some of the videos that I was watching of, like, Great Comfort, and he was talking to people on the coast, and a lot of people here don't even know Jesus.
Right.
That seems odd to say that in America, where we should all know. But what I was seeing is most people here don't really know. So for me, it was like the missions are here for me. So like when you say something you said really hit me, because you said you discovered God. I think I'd like to hear that story from you. Like, what caused you to discover God? Because I think most people aren't willing to die for their faith until they have discovered God. So I think that was perfect how you said that. But I know there's a story behind that that's huge. Because I know there is for me, because there's a point where you're like, are you willing to die for your faith? And I know you're going to say yes, because obviously for the last 12 years, you've been doing that. And that's what it takes to actually disciple people, is having no fear of what someone may do when they hear the gospel. And that here in the States, you're gonna get conflict from people. You may put people in an awkward position. And now you've put yourself in harm's way where you're at. So I think that for me, when you said that, it's like, why don't we have these people working, the workers? It's because they have not truly discovered God. And once they do, I think they'll start seeing stuff around them, and then they come into something where you're at. That's my point of view on that. But I'd love to hear how you discovered God, because that's the biggest question for everyone listening.
I can share that story, but Brad, do you want to chime in first, or what do you want?
I would say my thoughts on it would be, and I'm not sure how rare it is for people in Canada to be voluntarily serving in the military stuff. But I know for like in the United States military and across all branches, they told us that you are less than 1% of the U.S. population at any given time if you are serving in the armed forces. So I would assume it's probably something similar in Canada, not being like a forced service or a compulsory, or I can't think of the word.
Compulsory.
Yeah, compulsory service. It's completely voluntary. So it is a calling, right? And I think it's the same for any kind of missionary that's traveling throughout the world, or if their mission field is outside of their home country. I think that is a calling, and I think it also goes back to comfortability. Being from first world countries, we are very blessed. We're very comfortable in what we have, and not a lot of people are really willing to give that up to go and face the unknown, face the uncomfortable. It's very different to leave what you're familiar with to go into the unknown, knowing that you're going to be very uncomfortable, and you're trying to share the gospel, and who's going to I think the worst thing that might happen in the US or in Canada, like you share the gospel with somebody, they just reject it. They might call you some names or pick on you, whatever. The worst thing that can happen to you sharing the gospel is you could be killed. So I think that it's a comfortability, familiarity, fear of like actually losing your life. Are you, is somebody really willing to go out and make that sacrifice? And I think to do it on a worldwide scale, it is definitely a calling.
Thanks for your answers. I really appreciate that. And to answer, Kyle, your question about discovering God, when I was in the Army, so I grew up, my mom would drag me to church every Sunday when I was little, and I have an older brother and a younger brother, and we would sit in the pew and we would just fight with each other and elbow each other and like be bratty little boys, basically. But by the time when I was like 17, 18, I wanted to be a professional ice hockey player. I wanted to be in the NHL, and I was trying to become a junior player and then go on from there to become a pro hockey player. And I was struggling with my skills, my self-confidence, all these things. And I kind of said, like, how am I supposed to believe in God that I can't see when I don't even believe in myself? And so then I basically said, I'm just going to focus on my own life, my own self. I'm not interested in God. And for most of my 20s, had nothing to do with God or religion, a very typical religious pattern, kind of like, had some upbringing in the church, but left in the 20s. And we see this pattern all the time. And it wasn't until I joined the Army. I was doing a summer training course, and I was on a base, and I was not looking for God. But in order to get off the base on a Sunday, you had to be going to attend a religious service. Otherwise, you had to stay on the base. And so I didn't want to go to a religious service, but I did want to get off the base. And my friend said, hey, why don't you come to church with me? And so I said, yeah, I'm not really interested in this church stuff, but okay, I'll come with you. And I went to church, and the pastor was speaking like directly to me, as if like no one else in the congregation was there, but the message was right to my heart. And I just said, whoa, this is weird. I'm like, this is crazy. The next Sunday, the same thing. I went back to the church, and again, the pastor was like talking right to me, right to my heart. And I felt this like stirring in my heart. And I actually got up in the middle of the service and walked out. And my friend who had invited me to church, he came out and he said, man, I just think God is messing with you. And I looked at him and I said, I don't want God to mess with me. My life is good the way it is. And I literally left the service and walked around the block until the church service got out. But then the next week I went back to the church again, and every single week for 8 weeks in a row, I went back to this church service, and it was something directed directly to me. Like it was as if God is reading my mail and planning the service around me. And it got to this point where I could not deny that there was something bigger happening. I could not logically say in my brain, oh, it's just a coincidence. All these things that are happening, oh, it's just the way it is. And I got to this place where I said, there is a supernatural power. There is a God, a creator who wants my attention. And I was not pursuing God, but God was pursuing me, saying, hey, David, I want to be in a relationship with you. And it floored me. It wrecked me when I discovered the love that God has for me, the love that my Father has for me to pursue me. It changed my life. And so what can I do other than to say, okay, God, you're real. I am yours. I am your servant. And I want to be a child of God. So I gave my life to God. And then I went over, I was taking some time off from coaching, and I went over to Thailand to volunteer with this organization, the Free Burma Rangers. And I said to my boss there, I said, I'll give you 6 months, and then I'm going to go back to North America and get a real job. And 6 months has turned into 12 years. God had other plans for me there.
And there it is.
Yep. God's got a sense of humor. Can't get off the base unless you go to a religious service.
I know, right? I love it. I love it.
So we kind of talked about it before, like off air, but I want to really focus on like the disciples, making disciples aspect of it, just because I think that's where our paths really cross. So if you could define what discipleship means to you in like one sentence, what would you say that is?
Ooh, in one sentence.
You can make it a couple if you want.
I actually like the word apprentice. And I like because it's a word that I can relate to more. And in our culture, we can understand apprenticeships more. And so being a disciple to me is like, I am apprenticing under Jesus to learn the ways of my master. To not only knowledge and information, but the lifestyle of being somebody who has been with a master. And Jesus, a rabbi is a master. Jesus was like a rabbi, we could say. And so I would say that I want to be somebody who people say, oh, he is someone who has learned under a master and apprenticed under a master.
I think it's a good.
That's very well said. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think looking at Jesus, that's like the ultimate model, right? Like as far as discipling people. So what would you say that, Jesus expected from his disciples that, we often, like as a modern church, would overlook or maybe not even think about?
I think about the group that he had there, and we see the model of Jesus, like, he's got his 12, and then within the 12, he's got a smaller group that he's tighter with. Mm-hmm. And I think that, I think most churches now in the West, have small groups or cell groups or whatever we want to call them, life groups. And I really think that the Sunday service is kind of the main effort of a lot of the churches, but the actual growth, I think, comes in the small groups. And I think the real, like, when you have your group of 4 or your group of 12 maximum, that is really your reach as far as discipleship goes. And I think that is not, it's not an optional secondary thing that the church offers. That is the path. I think the Sunday service is great. It's the community stuff. It's all together. We're all worshiping together. But where you're really going to grow is going to be in that small group thing. And I think too often we think of discipleship as an optional secondary path.
Glad you. I was actually literally getting ready to ask you. Do you think that we think that it's more optional now? Because I mean, we can look in Scripture. I mean, you got Matthew 28:18-20, where he's giving out the Great Commission right before he ascends up to heaven. You know, go forth and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And if you look at Luke 9:23, he's talking about people coming up and asking like, what is needed to follow him. He said, so if we look at Luke 9:23, when he said to the crowd, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily and follow me. So it's not an optional thing. Right? It's, I mean, one is mirroring your life to match Christ, which I think we need to be doing before we start discipling others. Yeah. And the other one is telling us it is not optional. You need to go out into the world and show them everything that I've taught you. Show them how to live like me. So I think that's
one of the things that I really think is interesting is that, you know, Jesus, he didn't invite people to convert to a new religion. He didn't invite people to become Christians. It just, not that those are bad things. It just wasn't part of his language at the time. But we see, like you're reading it there over and over, his invitation is follow me. And it's not a word picture. It's a literal put down your nets or leave the tax collecting booth behind, or Philip, come and follow me, and leave everything behind and become a follower. And I just think that in the West, in America, I think it's something like 71% of Americans would say that they are Christian or have a Christian kind of religious background, but only 4% have a daily spiritual practice of their religion. And I just think that's amazing. Like, you have all these people who have said, okay, I'm going to claim Christianity, but only 4% actually have daily practices of being a disciple, of actually being a follower.
Yeah, we have a country of armchair Christians, right?
Yeah.
Go there on Sunday and take the rest of the week off. You know, go to church, and I went, I did my thing, I spent my hour and a half, and now the rest of my time is free for me.
Yeah.
Right. Dallas Willard said, the greatest issue facing the world today, which I think is amazing because there's, as we know, there's lots of big issues facing the world today. And I live in a war zone where you'd think that's a pretty big issue. But Dallas Willard said the greatest issue facing the world today is whether or not those who identify as Christians would become disciples. And for me, that every time I think about that, it just kind of sends a shiver down my spine, because it's like, oh man, I can sometimes be that guy who is like, knows the Christian lingo and says the Christian stuff and goes to church on Sunday, but am I actually practicing being a disciple?
And our focus here has changed in the last few years. Our church, after COVID and all the lockdowns, our church shriveled up to about 40 or 50 people. Wow. And down from a high of 300. And, you know, it's when we started coming back together, it's like a lot of people aren't coming back. You know, what do we need to look at and do? And it's make disciples who make disciples, because we had a lot of armchair Christians who, when the going gets tough, they fade away, right?
Right.
And so our focus has shifted here, and I think, you know, Brad's story of starting a podcast lends to how do we make disciples who make disciples? And our church is going through a process of trying to figure out the life groups and trying to figure out the next steps. So once somebody comes in and becomes a Christian, they believe, they've been baptized, they're shouting at the mountaintop, right? And then we all clap and say, yay, and then we let them go. Right. And then we don't give them any training. We don't tell them how to follow up. We don't offer to mentor them or disciple them. And so our church is making a deliberate effort to try to do that now and have a pathway for someone who's become a Christian and give them something that can help them grow as a disciple, become a disciple, and then go on to make disciples. And that change for us happened, you know, after that COVID period where, we get down to so many people, you look around and I was the youngest guy in the room. And I'm not a young guy, but the average age was 70, 75. And it's like, oh, holy smokes, we got to look at something different. So anyway, you guys were asking what discipleship was when we first started talking, and I'm glad you brought up follow, because my immediate answer would have been one word answer: follower.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is a disciple? I think you said, what is a disciple? Follower. Yes.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk more about like your own personal like discipleship, journey. If you could think of one person, like as far as when you think of discipleship, one person that comes to mind in your life, is there anybody that really sticks out, like who kind of mentored you or helped bring you up?
When I was growing up, my mother was a believer, but my father was not. And so my dad was fairly apathetic to most of it. He didn't have a problem with it, but he wasn't interested in it. And if my mom wanted to bring us all to church, then that was fine. And so I didn't have a father figure in my life that was guiding me along in the spiritual path. But one of my very best friends in youth group, his dad became, and still to this day is like a spiritual father to me. And it's so amazing. Like he and I will sit on his porch whenever I'm back, and even I'll text him when I'm in Burma and something's happening, and I'll text him and it'll be the middle of the night over here, and he'll say, "Hey, I'm getting on my knees right now and I'm praying for this and I'm praying for you." And he's the kind of person that I just know he adores me. He loves me. He loves me like a son. And he is pointing me to Jesus in all aspects of my life, challenging me on things. He's not just like patting me on the back every time and saying, "Oh, good job, you're so amazing." Like he'll kick me in the butt when I need that too. But yeah, he's been a spiritual father for me. And when in that decade where I left Christianity behind, he prayed for me every day for a decade. And I just think, wow, like what? Like I wouldn't, like that blows my mind that someone would do that. And I just think it's amazing. And I just think that there's power in when people pray persistently for the lost and for those to come to faith. And anyways, he's just been a real mentor in my life.
Now, is there any lessons that you've learned? Because I get humbled myself when I go to try to train somebody up or mentor or whatever. Whenever you're trying to, disciple others and teach them to be disciples, it's like, do you learn anything new, or are there any specific lessons that you learn about your own discipleship?
The thing that, that's a big question. And when I wrote my book that you mentioned at the beginning, I never meant for this theme to kind of come out of it. But then as I looked back on the book, I saw that this was a book about initiation. I was being initiated as a man by a good father. My father in heaven was leading me to Burma, leading me to a war zone, leading me to the jungle where I am not a fan of spiders and snakes and scorpions and centipedes. And I was afraid of everything. And my father gently initiated me to become the kind of person who can now lead others in that path of discipleship. But one of the things that I'm really wrestling with and dealing with myself is this, like these things here, these smartphones, because in reality, and my students, I see this with my students all the time, because in reality, we look for wisdom and the direction of our lives in a teacher. And this is being discipled. And I really believe that we have become disciples of the internet. We have become disciples of AI. And when I don't know something, which that is a regular occurrence, and especially starting the Jungle Discipleship School, I don't know how to build a solar system. I don't know how to set up a water filter, and I don't like, there's so many things I don't know. And I go on the internet, I go to Google and I type in something on Google and I push the button, and in 1 second, I get a million responses. And then I go to God with something in my life, and I bring this request to God, and God doesn't answer me in 1 second with a million different answers. And I kind of think like, oh, where's God? And so like being a disciple to the internet actually erodes our ability to wait on God. It erodes our discipleship path and process. And I just think that these devices that we cling to, that we look to for information and knowledge and all this different stuff, it actually is hindering our discipleship process, and we've become disciples to the internet.
I've never thought of it that way. As far as like just being a disciple, like, because we want instant gratification, right? We want it. We want what we want, and we want it now.
Yes.
And that's not God's way. Like God's going to give us what we need in His time. And we get so impatient. We want everything on our timeline that, like, all right, God, I asked you, you didn't give it to me right now. So
Right.
I got to go find another source.
Uh-huh.
So,
Like 85% of people, it said 85, and I'm guilty of this myself, 85% of people sleep with their phone directly beside their bed. Because it's the last thing we put down at the end of the day, and it's the first thing we pick up at the start of the day, because these things have become, we've become addicted to them, and they're our source of information and connection. And then I think it's something like 44% of people have actually sleep with their phone, like kind of holding it or under the pillow or in bed with them. 44% of people sleep with their phone. And in reality, it's become the adult teddy bear. We don't, when we were kids, we can't sleep unless we have our teddy bear. And now this has become like an adult teddy bear where it's got to be near us or got to be with us. Otherwise we start to feel uncomfortable, but we're tethered to it. And in reality, we need to be tethered to God. We need to be tethered to Jesus as a follower of Him.
exactly. So have you, being a mentor and a disciple who's making other disciples, have you ever poured into somebody like just continuously and then just have them walk away completely?
Yeah, often.
Yeah. I figured I knew the answer, but I figured I'd ask you. How do you handle that?
I had a student who came in my first year when I started JDS, and he was very adamant he was a Buddhist. And I said, okay, that's fine. You look at the Bible and you read the material, and you are free to make a decision. And so I would walk with him over the course of the year. And at Christmas time, he told me, now I am a Buddhist Christian. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. We're making progress here. And then at graduation, he told me, now I am a Christian Buddhist. And I said, okay, good. Like, we're still taking steps here. But I often have people who come to the school because in our first year programming, you don't have to be a Christian to come. You can be a Buddhist, an animist, an atheist. We have Catholics, we have Baptists, we have the whole spectrum. But you have to come with this idea and question in your heart, is God real? Can I actually have a relationship with the creator of the universe? Does the creator of the universe want to know me and have an intimate relationship with me? Is that true or not? Is this thing in the Bible, is this true or not? And so let's ask those questions. Let's dissect it. Let's dig into that. And at the end, they're free to do it. Like, they're free to say, yes, I want to believe in Jesus, or no, I don't want to believe in Jesus. But now they're informed, and now they have the information. And it's not easy. It breaks my heart. But I also know, like my student who was Buddhist, I know that it's a journey for them. And it may not happen in the course of the 9 months we're together at the Jungle Discipleship School. I had he kind of became like my little brother. I wrote about him in my book. His name is Bayray, and I journeyed with him for 10 years. And it wasn't until I left the Free Burma Rangers and started the Jungle Discipleship School. And he said, I'm following you. I'm not really interested in the Bible, but I'll follow you because you're doing it and you're my older brother. And he would read his Bible and he had a grade 4 education, but he would be super slow. Everyone else would be finished, and he'd stay there reading his Bible, and it transformed his life. And I had walked with him for 10 years, and finally he said, you know what? I'm ready to give my life to Jesus. I want to get baptized. But it took 10 years of walking together. And there were many times I was like, Bae, come on. I think you should become a Christian. I think you're ready. And he'd be like, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And it broke my heart. But my job is to love him. Mm-hmm. My job is to show Jesus' love to him and point him to the cross.
I mean, some of us are going to be, the seed planters. Some of us are the ones that are going around and watering. And then not everybody gets to actually be there for the harvest, right? When they actually make that decision. We've talked about it on here before. Like, was it like something like 15 interactions?
Yeah.
Typically about 15 different interactions from introduction to Christ to actually, making that final decision.
Or 15 different sources of interactions. Over time, that might be over years and years or decades and decades, but there's a first source that's initial, and then there's another source and another source. So you might be the first person in that group of 15, or you might be the last, or you might be in the middle and not ever see the fruit come when it does. And, that having that understanding that God's doing the work, you're just a vessel, and God's going to make it happen in his time. Yeah. And as long as you're part of doing God's will and you're there and doing what he's asking, then you've done your job, whether you got to see the fruit or not.
Mm-hmm. Now, for say the ones that choose not to continue on in the program, or do you follow up with any of them, or do you kind of respect their decision? And then,
yeah, we have a kind of a saying that, once you join the Jungle Discipleship School, you're part of our family. And so we will keep in touch with you as much as we can. It's very difficult in Burma. The government has basically shut down cell signal and connection in a lot of parts of the country. So once somebody leaves our campus, it can be very challenging to connect with them. But it's something we try to do. And as much as we can, we'll try to follow up with them.
Now we know that circumstances and situations that you face, it's not ideal. It can be very challenging. You're in a place far from home and ran by a government who doesn't want anything to do with God or the Bible. Mm-hmm. You're facing a lot of spiritual and physical warfare. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been tempted to just kind of give it up and walk away and just come back and say, I can do this, but I can do it at home?
I haven't necessarily been tempted to give it up and walk away. It's been very hard, and there have been times where I've wondered if I'm going to survive it. But there were in the early days and in the early years of being a missionary overseas and working in Burma, I always had this thought at the end of a kind of a season, and I would come home and do some fundraising for a month or two and then go back over. And at the end of that season, I kind of felt like, man, there's no way that next year can be as cool or amazing as this past year. There's no way that God can show up the way that he showed up this past year, because that was amazing. And I can just picture God kind of winking and smiling and saying, oh yeah, okay, here we go. And every year that I follow God is a greater adventure than the one previous. And every year that I open up more of my heart to more of God and allow God access to more places in my heart, it becomes even more beautiful and even more of an adventure. And I never think about quitting or leaving. I sometimes think okay, I might not survive this. I'm a little bit more like Mr. Bean over there than I am James Bond. But anyways, I'm so grateful that God has called me to the things he's called me to.
Well, I was going to kind of transition to, why we struggle with discipleship, but we kind of touched on it at the very beginning. Can
I chime in on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I asked you guys, and I appreciate your answers there. And Jim, you mentioned fear in your answer. And Brad, you had mentioned comfort in your answer. And one of the big lessons for me in Burma has been we cannot be, and this was a Free Burma Ranger motto, not to be led by comfort or fear. And every day we have a dozen different decisions that we need to make. Some of them are small, some of them are big, but every day we have to make decisions. And often the decisions, like you guys pointed out, are made based on comfort or being uncomfortable and fear. And we don't want to be uncomfortable. We want to be comfortable. And in the West, we live a very comfortable life and we don't like fear. And so if we remove comfort and fear as options for the decision-making process, then we have to be led by something else, something higher. And so at the Free Burma Rangers, we had this motto, don't be led by comfort or fear. And I remember when I was learning that lesson, because I often thought like, well, if I'm not going to let comfort or fear guide my decision, like what else is there? what am I going to use to make my decision? And in reality, we have to make our decisions based on love. What would love have me do here? What would love have me say to that person getting shot at, hey, okay, I'm not going to come and help you. I'm just, because it's too scary. Or would love have me leave my comfort and go and live in the jungle where I sleep in a bamboo hut and have had malaria 3 times. And like, that's what love would have us do. Love would have us do those things. And love, we see it with Jesus. He invaded our story, and out of love for us, he went to the cross and gave up his life for us. And I just think it's amazing when we think, okay, love is what's going to help me make my decisions.
That's a great point. We got to remove the personal like barriers, I guess, to preventing us from making those type of decisions. Like, what is going to I guess what is about me is keeping me from going and doing something like that, and focus more on why am I not doing it to go help somebody else. So I think there's a lot of, I would say, misconceptions or lies that we might tell ourselves to maybe not take on a discipleship role. I think one of those big ones being, I'm not ready myself. Like I don't have the knowledge or the expertise. What do you have to say, like, if somebody tries to give that type of excuse?
I get it. Like, I often feel totally underprepared or educated or unready for all of this stuff. And, I just try to build it into our programming at my school. And I think churches need to do this as well. And Jim, like what you were saying, I think it's really great that you're focusing on building a program for people who come into the church. And I think that the last step in the program is now go and duplicate this. Mm-hmm. And so we do that with our students, where I kind of focus on the junior staff, and then the junior staff focus on the senior students, and the senior students focus on the junior students. And all of our our second year students all have a small group, and I give them questions each week, and they have to go off with their small group and spend time together. And I want them to know, you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be intentional about it. And I think that there are no accidental saints. It takes intentionality. It takes intentionality in our lives that we have to say, I am going to just do it. And I'm not going to know all the answers, but I'm going to turn to somebody. I'll turn to somebody like Kyle or Jim or you, Brad, and I'll say, hey, guys, this is something that came up in my small group. What do? I don't know the answer to this. Or how do I answer this kind of question? And just to be okay with not knowing all the answers.
Mm-hmm. I think if we wait until we're ready, or quote unquote ready, before we actually start trying to, disciple somebody or help somebody grow, we'll never start, because we'll never completely feel ready. There's always that level of like imposter syndrome, or, you just feel inadequate. When we can look straight to scripture and show, like, Jesus trained up the 12, and then he sent them out, and they were expected to go and spread the gospel. They weren't 100% ready each time that they went out. They weren't they made mistakes. They made plenty of mistakes. But you can still learn and you can still grow while you're actively trying to help other people learn and grow. I think our journey, our lessons that we learn along the way is a big part of helping other people grow, who are currently in the season that you've gotten through already.
Well, and I think you learn more by teaching or attempting to teach or trying to train. You learn way more yourself than when you were being taught. And so if you are looking to help someone become a disciple, you will learn how to be a disciple yourself way better than you are today.
I like what you said there, because I know there's probably a ton of men out there listening that want to go out and make disciples, but they're scared. They don't know if they know enough information. And to hear someone who's in Burma putting their life on the line, who's done this for 12 years in the missions, say, I feel underprepared. That's got to make someone out there go, okay, so no matter how long you do this, we're always going to feel underprepared. And then we have to rely on our Father and Jesus to get us there. Yeah. Because if we don't rely on him, that feeling of being unprepared is going to keep us from going. So when you said that, I thought, wow. And there was another thing you said that about every year that you open your heart to Jesus and allow him to work in your heart, you see more amazing things. That, I think, is what actually brings people into those, because the more they open and soften their heart, the more they're going to go to him, even in those moments like you have. And for 12 years, you might feel underprepared, but you have such faith in him that you're going to say, okay, I'm going to go do this. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but he's in control. So I thought those two things were really, really good, because I know for me, if I was listening, I'd be like, that's a lot. I don't think I would ever be prepared for that. And to hear you say that makes me know that no matter where you're at, you're never going to feel prepared enough, and you got to put all your faith in Christ.
Kyle, I appreciate that, because whenever I remember when I was young and a visiting missionary or someone in missions would come to the church and share an update, I always thought, these are like the best and the brightest of the church. And I kind of thought that the ones that were sent to missions were the ones that, had all the scripture memorized and could answer all the questions, and they were the best and the smartest. And then when I became a missionary, I had this imposter syndrome, because I was like, I am definitely not that guy. Exactly. I am the bozo in the church, and yet God has called me to go and serve as a missionary. And I felt like I don't know the answers. I don't know what I'm doing there. And not only in the spiritual side, but also in a war zone, I felt completely out of place. And like I said, I'm like Mr. Bean, like bumbling my way around the jungle, crossing borders, going through landmine fields, getting bombed, getting shot at. And I'm just like, I don't know how I'm surviving this, but I am so thankful to live a life that requires prayer. If God doesn't show up, I'm hooped. Like, if God doesn't show up in my daily life, in all the things that I'm doing, like I'm in big trouble. And so God has to be real there. And I just think where I live in the jungle, we have these dirt roads or dirt trails in the jungle. And the first time you go over a dirt road, you get one line in the dirt. And then over and over, if you keep going down that same line, it forms ruts in the dirt road. And eventually the ruts become so much that it's even harder to drive outside of the ruts than it is. You kind of just keep coming back into it. And that's kind of how our brains work. In neuroplasticity in our brains work the very same way. And if I continue to go to the internet, pornography, to anger, to drinking, to addictions, that's the pathway that my brain is going to form. And over time, the more I do it, it's going to become easier and easier and easier to do those things. But if I switch and I say, I'm going to make a pathway where I'm going to come back to God 100 times throughout a day. Jesus, I come back to you. I come back to you. I'm rooted in you, Jesus. I'm taking shelter in you. When I come back and I bring my focus, my attention, and my affection back to God 100 times a day, I start to create those neural pathways. And then it actually becomes harder to not come back to God because I slowly create that in my brain. And we slowly build a habit of knowing God and turning to God and being a disciple of God.
That's excellent. What you just said there about 100 times a day, I know that probably steps into one of those, like, really? For a lot of people out there. But that is exactly how porn, how everything gets overcome. It doesn't matter if it's anger or anything. If you constantly go back to Jesus. So exactly what you said is exactly what I experienced in my own life. That the moment that you started going, every moment you had a something come in, a temptation, anything, you go to Christ in your mind, and maybe it's 100, maybe it's more, maybe it's just always, and then that relationship builds. And what you said there just hit me really good. So I was like, that's perfect. I really like that, because I think there's a lot of men out there that are like, how do I get over these? How do I make that relationship? And you just said it. I mean, it's 100 times a day in your head, but it doesn't feel like 100 times a day. It just feels like you're going to your Father, you're going to your Savior.
Yeah. And it's where am I sending my heart's attention and my heart's affection? My heart's affection, my heart's attention is either going to go to porn, it's going to go to addictions, it's going to go to all these different distraction, even like Netflix. I'm going to watch YouTube videos or Netflix, and I'm just going to be distracted, is where my heart's attention and affection is going to go. Or, Father, I want to take refuge into you. I want to take refuge in you today. I want to be rooted in you today, over and over and over. And even like, okay, I can come and do the Zoom call, but afterwards, my brain starts to go, okay, what's next? What's next? No, I'm coming back to you, Jesus. I'm coming back to you over again.
Yeah, that's very good.
So I think a lot of men, not just men, I think people in general, when they think about discipleship, they have like a picture in their head, or maybe sometimes it's going to be misconceptions of what discipleship actually entails. So you founded the Jungle Discipleship School. You're teaching these people to be disciples and going out and making disciples. Can you walk us through what like an actual like discipleship relationship looks like, that in the way that you teach it?
Yeah, so we in our first year programming, we unpack a lot of the Christianity, a lot of what is the Bible. Every week over the 9 months we're there together, every week we have one theme or one class that we focus on, and a new way to experience God or to know God. And we slowly start to add categories of relationship with God. And so I would picture it like, I don't know if you have them there, but up in Canada, we have like a community mailbox, a big set where you like all these different mailboxes. And I show a picture of this on the screen, and I ask the students to imagine that some of those boxes are missing. It's just, you can see right through. And others are small mailboxes, and some of them have big mailboxes, and some are getting a lot of mail, and some are getting mail every so often. And each time we start a new week, we ask God for I want to know you, God, in a new way. I want to experience you as Father. I want to experience you as Holy Spirit. I want to experience you as Jesus. And I want to experience you as protector, as provider, as all of these different ways, these different names that we have for God in the Bible. And so then we slowly get a new mailbox, a new way, a new place to receive mail from God. So that's kind of our first year programming. And those that accept Christ and get baptized are welcome to come back to an optional second year where they get to develop a ministry plan. And I want to align their passions with a calling to ministry or business as missions. And they, over the course of the second year, they build their ministry plan, and I get to poke holes in it and ask them all sorts of questions like, what about this? And how much is that going to cost? And did you think about that? And go and get estimates on all these things. And so over the course of the second year, they build their ministry plan. And then at the end of the year, we commission and send them and support them to then go and execute their business as missions or their ministry plan, so that the gospel can now multiply out across Burma.
So it's a total of 2 years.
For now, yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, very good. I was curious. I was going to ask how many years you had available. That's good.
In the beginning, I thought it was going to be one year,
One and done.
and one and done. And my vision was I want to give all of these students a foundation that they can go and build their life upon. And it doesn't matter when they leave if they want to become soldiers or medics or doctors or farmers or whatever, because now they have a foundation that they can build their life on. And partway through year one, some of my students said, okay, what's year two going to be like? And I was like, oh man, like, let's just survive this first year. But then slowly this vision of making disciples, how it came. And rather than us having 100 students on our campus, I want to train up my students so that they can take what we're doing and go and replicate it in their own area, in their own languages, in their own cultures, so that they can have what we're doing at the Jungle Discipleship School in all corners of Burma, in places I can't get to or other missionaries can't get to, and they will be missionaries to their own people.
No, I think it's important to understand for like the people that are listening, like it doesn't have to be like in this type of like educational format. Like what Dave is doing, you could easily do with like a small group or just like, not even at church. Like it could be just a couple guys that hang out together and you're wanting to maybe to start discipling them. It doesn't have to be in this like formal education format, but he's got a great model of, you're sitting there, you're teaching that because I think a big part of discipling is you have to be able to teach them first. Like they have to be able to know the basics, and then you build from the ground up. How much of a like disciple or discipleship relationship would you say is like just like living life together, just in the trenches?
A lot. We spend 6-7 hours a day, Monday to Friday, in the classroom, but we live on campus with each other 24 hours. Like all of our students live on campus and they're there for 9 months. And I actually think like we have great curriculum and good material, but more of the discipleship happens outside of the classroom than it does in the classroom. And it's how do we celebrate each other? How do we have joy in our lives? How do we overcome addictions together? How do we grieve together? How do we fight with each other and have conflict with each other? Let's learn and watch how we're doing it together. Let's do it together in community, because I think more of it happens outside of the classroom than in the classroom.
Yeah. And I think you brought it up earlier. Cheerleading and championing is a big part of it, but we need to also like make sure you're holding people accountable. Cause I think that's how we grow. I mean, you could easily, be told, I think that's a big problem we have here in America is like, you're told, oh, you're great. You're doing this awesome. You don't do anything wrong. And then you start to believe it. And then you think that you have this mentality of, oh, I'm the best there is. I can't do anything wrong. And then you're not able to take any kind of criticism after that. I think accountability is a big part. Like you have to be able to be championed and be told like, hey, you're doing great, but also where you fall short, you have to be able to be told that as well. So we can learn and not be stuck in these, these bad habits that we tend to form.
Yeah. I'm going to take a tangent there real quick. So David started off with 71% of people in America identify as Christian, but only 4% are active. And that's the narrow gate and the wide path, right? So the wide is the path that leads to destruction, but it's the easy path, and narrow is the gate that leads to salvation, but it's the hard path. And so I think we look around and someone's doing something here, and other people will look at them and say, look at all the stuff they're doing. Well, that's because you're comparing them to other people around who are armchair Christians who are not doing anything. And so you think they're doing great. We need to compare that to Jesus, not to other people. And that's where we get these issues going where, man, that person, they just look at all they do, man. They're just a real saint. They're just doing this and that and the other. And they think that's a big deal. But when you compare it to a disciple who makes disciples, they're doing 1%, right? But in these other people's mind, they're doing 100%. And if you're looking at it with a different lens, what did Jesus do, and following him and compared to him versus comparing to other people, you get a totally different view and a totally different thing. So I'm sorry to take you off on a tangent, but that's what happens, especially here. And people have a skewed sense of measurement, if you will, a skewed sense of what's important, a skewed sense of what the reality of being a Christian is. And they think that, that person's doing, hey man, they go to church on Sunday, they're in a Wednesday morning Bible study, they're doing a Thursday thing, and they're doing all these little activities throughout the week. Man, they're just really on it. They got it. They know what's going on, I the older I get, the more my lens changes, hopefully for the better. But I look back now and say, did I waste a lot of time doing that kind of stuff versus just sitting down and saying, God, I experienced God. And you mentioned it early on, and Kyle asked you about it, David, and you experience God. And when you do, you go out and you want to give your whole life to him, and you want to do everything for him. Well, I wonder how much people have experienced God who are able to sit at home and sit on the sidelines.
That was going to be my question for David. When you're discipling these individuals as they're going to go out, how many of them are experiencing God and have that moment like you did, where it's like, I discovered God's real? Because if they're going out there doing that, they have to have found him in a way that's beyond, like what we see here in America, where we just went to church and mom and dad made us go. And, there's something real that happens somewhere in those individuals' lives that really make them like, no, this God is real. So when you're talking to your disciples, as you're walking them through, or your apprentices, as you would say, how does that look? I mean, have they had tons of answered prayers? I mean, I go to that a lot because I think that happens a lot, and then it's undeniable, and then it's like, okay, this is real. So what does that look like?
I was discipling a student, and I was encouraging him to pray. And then over and over, this was going on for a few months. And then finally he was telling me, hey, my grandma is really sick. Would you pray for my grandma? And I said, sure, I'll pray for your grandma, but I want you to pray for your grandma as well. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable to pray, and I'm not sure about this. And so his grandma was really sick for like 2 weeks. And finally he said, okay, tonight I'm concerned about my grandma, and I'm going to pray for her. And so he literally, he got down and he prayed, and he was really into this prayer. And the next day his grandma died. And he was like, what? Like, after all that, I thought that this would be the cure thing. This would be the thing. And he's like, now what do I do with this? And I was like, oh man, okay, yeah, this is not how I expected that to play out. I kind of thought, this is all going to be a beautiful thing, because we're going to have this answered prayer moment, and he's going to see the power of prayer. And it doesn't always work like that. And so what I see with these students, and that same student later in the year, I saw him fall in love with Jesus, in a real relationship with Jesus. And he's a very musical guy, and I would see it in worship times, and he would just leave the room and go to the very back just so he could have his own time and space to worship God. And other students, they come and they're gloomy and depressed and full of addictions and anxiety, and seeing them get freed from addictions and just seeing them smile. I walk around campus, and most days, some days I'm a grumpy guy with not enough coffee, but most days I walk around campus and I'm just smiling, and I catch myself smiling, because there was a lot of time in my life where I lost my smile. And my students come and they have lost their smiles. And when they fall in love with Jesus and they experience the love of Jesus, they get their smiles back. And it's so cool to see a light in their eye and a smile on their face. And it's more than anything else that I teach in the class. What really transforms the students is when they read their Bibles. And every morning we have a Bible reading plan. And so it's not a teaching thing. It's not a Bible study. we'll have time in the classroom for learning and stuff like that. It's just the practice of a quiet time. So I'm going to just sit quietly and I'm going to read my Bible. And as they're forced to do this, they actually look forward to it, and they enjoy reading their Bibles. And more than anything I teach, it's the Word of God that transforms their lives.
Very good.
Now, I know you have something after this. Are you still good on time right now, or?
Yeah, I've got a few more minutes.
Okay. We'll touch on this a little bit because I think Jim brought it up at the beginning, where I think for us, at least the Western church, the modern church, we have a big problem with, we focus on the conversion rates, but we kind of just drop it at that, right? And then you talked at the very beginning how Jesus would pour into 12, right? He focused on a small group, and I believe you were saying like it's because a small group you can spend time together. You're living life together. You can pour into them. I think more intimately. Would you agree with that? Right?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
I would agree with that.
So what would you say that something that Jesus did with his disciples, with those initial 12, that is lacking in our church today?
I often, and I say this partially, I say this playfully, but I always encourage men to stop going for coffee with each other. Because it's in the West, and I do this myself, it's like we default to that, like, hey, bro, like, can we go get a coffee together? And we end up sitting in a coffee shop somewhere and we have a conversation or something. And I say it jokingly because I think it's good. But what I think we see Jesus doing is doing life together, do stuff, go for a walk, be moving. And the physical, like, it's a whole holistic model we see with Jesus, where they're walking down the road together. They're sitting next to a campfire. They're fetching water. They're making food, like they're fishing. And we see a holistic body involvement with it. And too often we just are sitting down and we have our cup of coffee and we have a shallow level of vulnerability and intimacy with each other over at a coffee shop. And I just think that when we engage our bodies with it, when we have an activity to do together, and we can have our fellowship at the same time where we're doing something together, it opens up a new dynamic to it.
So would you say that would be a great way for us as like the Western church to move away from the, I want to focus on just gaining followers for Christ to I want to make disciples for Christ? The key aspect is just living life together.
Yeah, I think that the conversion rate that you mentioned shouldn't be the number that we go for, but the person that comes through our plan and then that person goes to lead a small group, that's the number that we count. And if I bring in 12 people and 4 of them go to make their own disciple, like they have their own little Bible study or they start their own small group, that's the metrics that I think is really cool to look at, rather than, 12 people accepted Jesus or became Christians, but 4 of them actually are going to make other disciples because they have been transformed in their own discipleship journey.
Now, would you say there's a certain time, I won't say time frame, but like, I don't know if it maybe metrics or something like that, where somebody would be considered ready to go and actually start training up other disciples? Or do you think that it should go and happen right away?
That's a good question. And I'll caveat all of this by saying I'm not an expert at any of this.
I don't think any of us are.
I am going to make mistakes and I'll say the wrong things here. And, but I think that there's 2 answers to this. In my brain, I have 2 answers. One is that we see the model of Jesus, that he spent 3 years with his guys, and then he turned around and said, okay, guys, you're ready. Go and make disciples. However, I also feel like we sometimes we don't encourage people to start right away, to start from the beginning and say, hey, I don't know, I'm new to all of this. Let's do it together. I want to invite a small group into this, and we're going to learn this together. And I'm not good at it. I'm not an expert. I don't have all the answers. And so let's do it together. And having a crew with you on your discipleship journey. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think having activity with each other is much better than sitting down at a coffee shop. I mean, I think of the group Habitat for Humanity that builds houses for people here in the U.S. and I know they're an international organization as well. And I served on a group in another town where I had lived at that time. And I'll tell you what, swinging a hammer and driving nails and sitting around chatting with people and getting to know them and learning a little bit more about them was a great way to do that. And I was young at the time, so I wasn't thinking of being a disciple who makes a disciple. But I'll tell you, I was thinking about helping that family that was going to get to move into that house. And if we're all here trying to help that family get to move into that house, and we're providing the labor to do that, we're learning a lot about each other, and we're sharing the love of Christ by doing that. So, I like the activity side of things, and I think Brad had mentioned it, or we've talked about it on the podcast before. You can be out hunting or fishing or doing something together and be out in God's creation and be admiring God's creation and having a worship service right there where you are, and those kind of things. And so that activity level that you're doing something more than just a Bible study too. I think a Bible study is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dismissing that. And I like the idea of a Bible study, but after Bible study, let's go out and do some stuff together.
I just think there's also a posture of sonship. Like, I am a son of God, therefore I must become a son of God. I have to act like a son and have a posture of sonship. And there are many days where, I wake up and I'm tired or grumpy and I don't feel like praying, or if I pray, it feels like I'm talking to the walls. And one of my favorite prayers to go back to is just, Father, will you father me today? And asking to be fathered, which puts me in a position of sonship. And then I pay attention to the fathers that God brings into my life. And like you're saying, going swing a hammer, or like my truck breaks down all the time and I have no idea how to fix it. And so I go to another person in my life, and I say, hey, let's do this together. Help me fix this. Help me build this. Help me solve this problem. And I am being fathered in that process. And if I pay attention to that, I can find God in all of those activities.
So I think, as maybe I don't call it a challenge, I guess, to whoever's listening. But if, say, somebody they're listening, they're ready to make that step, they want to go ahead and begin discipling others. So if somebody is going to commit to discipling, say, just one other person for the next year, what advice would you give them?
So I would start by quoting the famous Matt Damon. There was a movie called We Bought a Zoo, and there's a line in it that I really love, and I show my students this as well, where he's talking about, like, he wanted to ask out his future wife, this girl he thought was beautiful, and he thought, I want to go on a date with her. And he talks about 30 seconds of courage. You need to have courage for just 30 seconds to go and take that first, to go and say hi to the person, or to go and do something. And I think if you feel called to missions, if you feel called to lead other people in discipleship, to have 30 seconds of courage to take that first step, to send the email to somebody, it takes 30 seconds. To call them and say, hey, I want to do this, or send a text and say, I want to mentor, I want you to mentor me this year. Will you walk with me in that? Or I want to do a small group. Will you do that with me? And then pick a book to read together and discuss it, or pick an activity that you're going to do once a week and set a schedule where you actually do it. But I think the biggest thing is you need 30 seconds of courage to take that first step.
That's a great advice.
Yeah, that's really good.
Matt Damon.
Because I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, is like they have all these grand plans. They like, all right, I'm finally going to do it. And then it comes time to actually making the decision or make that first step of executing. and that's when we usually wimp out.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
30 seconds of courage.
Yep.
And then just keep doing that, right?
Yep.
Well, I think
Yeah.
after you get that initial step, then you realize, oh, well, it really wasn't as bad as I thought.
Well, it could
Exactly.
be terrible.
It could be terrible.
Yeah, it could
You know-
be terrible, but then you need another 30 seconds.
When God calls you to something, he's going to equip you to do it. And
Yeah.
he'll, I remember there was a time I was being shot at by the Burma army, and I was in a trench line, and there was a Burma army sniper that was shooting at people. And he was a very good, well-trained sniper. And I was hiding in my trench in the hole. And in my brain, it was going through my brain, oh, he's got me in his crosshairs. And if I make one move, if I do anything, he's going to shoot me. As soon as I pop up from my trench, he's going to shoot me. And this is what my brain is telling me. And then I'm thinking, hey, I'm not doing my duty hiding in a trench. There are people over there that are also getting shot at, and they need help. And if I live my life ducking in a trench, okay, maybe I'm going to survive this moment, but I'm not going to be able to do the thing that I'm called to do, which is go and help those people. And so I need 30 seconds of courage. I'm going to get up, I'm going to go out of the trench, and I'm going to go and help them. And once you stand up and start running, okay, now you're in it. Now you're going, and like, there's no going back now. And so, but we often will live just saying, okay, I'm just going to live in my hole. I'm not going to get out of the hole. And we need 30 seconds of courage to get up and get out of that hole.
I like the wisdom.
Yeah, it's very good.
All right. So you ready for a lightning round of questions?
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Doesn't have to, it's nothing super deep. So, so what would you say the biggest myth about discipleship is?
That we need to have all the answers before we start doing it.
All right. What's the biggest mistake that churches make? Like, or like, even if you don't want to do just the church as a macro, like the biggest mistake as far as discipleship that, say, Christian men make?
Treating God like travel insurance.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what do you mean?
Sure. I just think we often, especially in the West, we kind of feel like God is like travel insurance to our lives, where, you make your deposit into it, but you've made your vacation plan or your life plan. And hopefully you don't need to rely on it too much for your travel insurance because you've got your plan and your way of doing things. And you make your Sunday deposit into travel insurance. And I feel like sometimes we treat God like that.
What a great analogy. I like that.
Fantastic.
What's one habit that every disciple should develop?
Silence.
Ooh, I like that.
I'm really bad at it, but I just think it's, our device, coming back to this again, our devices are never silent. Well, I mean, maybe they're on silent, but we're constantly thinking about it, and to just learn to be still and learn to be quiet. We're not good at that anymore.
Yeah, we use that scripture a lot here. Be still and know that I am
Yes.
God.
Yes.
All right. So obviously the Bible is going to be one book, but what is one book that every Christian should read?
Outside of the Bible,
Outside of the Bible.
I loved the book Beautiful Outlaw by John Eldridge. And it really, growing up, I knew Christianity as a religion.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know Christianity as a relationship with a living God. And for me, that book really showed me a living God.
And what is one verse or passage that every man should memorize?
I love Jeremiah, where he says, I stand at the crossroads and look and ask for the old and ancient paths and walk in them. And then you will find peace for your soul. And I just think that, oh man, over and over again, we come to these crossroads in our lives, moment by moment. Am I going to do this? Am I going to look at that? Am I going to look at this? Am I going to go here? We are always at these crossroads, and ask for the ancient way. Ask for the ancient path and walk in it. And I just think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
All right. Do you guys have any other questions before we get closed out here?
Well, I'm just going say I've started to read your book, David, and I'm sorry I didn't get it finished before this, but it's very intriguing story, and it's really opened my eyes a little bit to how comfortable I've become, and how my life is right now, and that's the intriguing part. So I appreciate you putting it out there. And would you mind sharing the name of your
Sure.
book?
Yeah, it's Nameless Faceless People, 10 Years with the Free Burma Rangers, and it's on Amazon, or there's an audio book and ebook, and it's on Barnes & Noble and all these different places. Thank you for reading it.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people who thinks, wow, look at all that they're doing. They're doing a really good job, when I should be saying, look what Christ did, and why am I not doing more?
Yeah. So I got 2 more questions for you as we close out, if you're all right with that. So what is one thing that you hope that every listener will take away from this?
I hope that listeners will not ask for life to be easier, but will ask to be stronger. And too many of my prayers, too many of the way I talk to God is to ask for my life, to make my life easier, to bless this, heal that, provide this. And I would encourage people, don't ask for it to be easier, but ask to be stronger so that you can go and do more in the kingdom of God.
Great advice.
Yes.
And then how can people connect with you and your ministry? You say they want to help out, whether it be like financially, or they want to volunteer and, put their life on hold for 9 months the year.
Yeah, come on.
That's not putting their life on hold. That's putting their life in gear, man. They're going out making disciples. That's the top gear.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
So how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, the 3 biggest needs that I have is for staff, for financial supporters, and for prayer warriors. And all of that information people can find it's jds.asia. So like Jungle Discipleship School, jds.asia it's a link tree, and then it'll take you to the 501c3. It'll take you to my prayer warriors sign up page. It'll link you to volunteer opportunities. The book is also there. So jds.asia is where everything is.
Awesome. All right. Do you guys have anything else before we close out in prayer?
I'm going to say I'm a little bit overwhelmed on this episode, just because I'm rethinking everything I'm doing right now, and seeing it through a new lens, and sitting here listening to David and everything he's doing makes me feel very like my life is very small, and that I'm not doing what I should be doing. So I'm going to have to rethink that.
Very good.
Now, Dave, do you have anything that you would like from us?
I just feel like as men, I just think it's important for us to know that we are not behind, we are not late, we are on time, and we are in the right place right now. And God is working on our hearts. All of us are on this journey. And I just think it's important for us to know, okay, we are not late, we are not behind, we are on time, and we have a good Father who's got a good plan for our lives.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close out the prayer and let Dave get to his other commitments.
Okay.
So, all right. Lord and Heavenly Father, creator of the heavens and the earth, Lord, we thank you for allowing us to sit down and have this awesome conversation. And we thank you for allowing David's path and ours to cross. Lord, we pray that you be with David and all the other missionaries working, not only to spread your name, but also to equip people to go out and be disciples that make disciples. Lord, please embolden us to go out and make disciples that go out to make more disciples, whether it be here, whether it be in other missionary fields across the world. Please give us the strength, courage, and the wisdom to pour into the fellow Christians and help them grow in their relationship with you. We love you. It's in Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We know that you have a short amount of time back in North America before you got to go back over. Thank you for penciling us in and spending time with us and sharing your story. And
Absolutely.
we're very humbled and honored to have you.
It was a big honor, and I hope next summer I can come and sit in the couch with you guys.
We'd
and
love that.
and come visit and do it in person.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Just, we'll definitely keep in touch. And now I guess it's kind of a separate matter, but like, do you always come back to North America at the same time, or does it vary, or?
It's usually July and August. I'm back in North America.
Okay. So awesome. All right. Well, if we don't talk to you again before you head back, definitely be careful, and keep doing God's work, and keep your head down.
Awesome.
And I'll check out the JDS.Asia Prayer Warrior site. And
Yeah, great.
See what I can find there.
Yeah, if you're listening, and I know everybody gets called to do different. If you feel called, you might be called to help in different ways. If you can donate, please donate. Every little bit will help. Prayer, it seems small, but it is so big. Yeah. Just spending time, petitioning to God. Just pray for David, pray for the ministry, everybody that's involved. And if you feel led, by all means, get in contact with them. If you can go and actually serve, we say it all the time, the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few.
Yeah.
So
Matthew 9:38.
So if you feel called, by all means, 30 seconds of courage. Just what David was saying, like, if you feel called, please just, don't let the devil and the lies creep in and say that you're not needed, because it is definitely needed.
Yeah. Take that next step. Don't be afraid.
So, all right. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks. God bless you.
You too.
You too.
God bless you. Appreciate you.